Congratulations on your pilot's license.
Thank you. And it's only part 107, but boy, I'll tell you what, when I was studying for it, there were some times I thought it might be easier to just get a general aviation pilot's license and just go all the way.
Is that what the video's on today?
Yep.
There are a lot of schools out there that can teach you what you need to know about becoming a drone pilot, both in person and online. Is that what you did?
No, I'm an academic, so I did it on my own. But it certainly was a good bit of work.
And you spent a lot of time doing it.
Oh, I did. I think all told, I spent about 60 hours over the period of about 4 to 6 weeks. And it took me a good 2-day weekend to get started. There's a lot of different pieces to put in place, and you got to get it organized. If I hadn't found a couple of websites and YouTube sites to help me get it organized, I'm sure that I wouldn't have done as well. After doing all of that work and all of that study, I think I might recommend that you take one of the online classes where it's a couple $100 and they organize it for you. When you go to get yours, I think I'm going to recommend that we pay for the class because it's a lot to keep up and things are moving a lot.
And that has a lot to do with knowing your learning style too.
It sure is.
So he is definitely more of a studier. As far as I need to go out and read it and study it and learn it myself, I am very much more of a person that needs it spoon-fed to me, or I will squirrel and be looking at RVs. So did you do okay on your test?
I did. I got a 95.
Show off.
And it wasn't free. It was free-ish.
He really is a show off, guys.
Take me to the place where I come from, the only place where I really belong. Take me 'cause this voyage seems so long.
So why are we back here talking? I thought you were going to be talking about FAA websites.
Well, we were, but we should probably talk about why we want a drone license between us.
Oh, right. Photos.
And memories.
Right, because after 25 years of traveling, we have no pictures of ourselves.
We only really have pictures of the dogs.
Well, that's true.
Hopefully this will force us to do a little better.
But couldn't we have done this without a license as a hobbyist?
Well, you could, but the laws about drones and pilots and using drones are kind of, they're not really clear. And as a hobbyist, you can do certain things, but you can run into a problem where you get commercial very quickly. So the laws on what is commercial and what isn't aren't really clear. For example, if you go as a hobbyist and get drone footage now, right, we're off collecting, we're out hiking or whatever, and we get that, and we post it on YouTube, and then in 6 years from now, the channel takes off, and all of a sudden we're monetized, and that footage is now used in a monetization. The FAA could say that that was a commercial activity, even though it was done 6 years ago, right? And I could have gone to an attorney and gotten an opinion, but the laws changed and all of that, and getting the FAA license was probably just a lot more certain that we would always be on the side of the right. It was just a much better ROI to go pay and get the license. So now I'm a commercial pilot, and we know what the laws are.
Can you say you're a commercial pilot?
Technically, according to the FAA, I am a pilot with a commercial endorsement. They do make a distinction, obviously, between UAS and other types of pilots, but the license and everything is essentially just one of the variations of pilot license, from general aviation to air transport pilot. It sounds a lot more impressive than what it is, but the test was pretty serious in how they treated it, so we're trying to treat it seriously. Anyway, we should probably talk about the video and get into the actual training.
Probably.
So before we can start studying for the test, we should probably take a look at what the requirements are and what the process we're going to have to go through in order to get our license. This is the starting point. This is the FAA website, and it has all the information about all the material, what the process and procedures are, and everything like that. Now, if you take a look at this and say, boy, this is a lot of information, I'm not sure I want to go through this, then there is another option, and that is to basically become a recreational flyer. Now, I will caution you that this is not like deciding I'm going to become a recreational flyer and I'm going to go buy a drone and I can put it up and I can do whatever I want with it. That is this page, and there's quite a bit of process in becoming a non-commercial flyer. There are limitations, and you still have to follow a lot of the procedures, and you have to register your drone, and you still have to become registered through the trust process. So make sure you understand the requirements and the benefits of both, and you may decide that it is worth to going through the process to get your Part 107 license. So let's start taking a look at CFR Part 107, also known as the small UAS rule. So this is the actual Part 107 as written into law. If you're reading a summary or an opinion or something else somewhere else and it conflicts with this, this is the authoritative source. This format's not bad. It's got cross-links in it and embedded links. And when I first started reading it, I was like, oh, this isn't too bad. This is only about 17 or 18 pages. And it really does read pretty well, except for the part on operations over people where they spread it over 9 different pages or something. But I started reading this, and then after a while, you realize that there's cross-references in here. So it says like the provisions of Part 21 of this chapter. Well, that's actually, we're reading Part 107. Part 21 is a completely different section of the law. And then there's USC 44809 and Part 91 of this chapter. And Part 91 deals with registering things like 737s. And you start building this web of material, and all of a sudden the cross-links start getting pretty big. So I would read this to start with, and know that you're going to be reading a lot of other material that's going to help you to understand. But this is what you come back to, and this is what I reviewed at the very end before walking in to take my exam, because this really is the defining piece. The good news is that the FAA realized that this is pretty big, and when you start reading all the cross-references to Part 89 and Part 47 and Part 49, that you could get a whole lot of material, and those all sources would link to other sources, which link to other sources, and pretty soon you're studying the entire law of the entire United States. And so the FAA says, okay, we're going to help test takers define what they need to study a little bit more, and we'll talk about that next. The FAA has published something called Airman Certification Standards, and this is Form ACS 10B. And what this does is this shows you all the things that you're going to have to take to know on the test, or that you're going to have to take on the test. And it's broken down into regulations, airspace classifications, weather, loading, performance, operations, and then some other pieces. And what's kind of neat is that you come in and it's broken down by knowledge items. So this tells you what these are called ATAC codes or something like that. Basically, if you take the test and you miss a question, rather than telling you what you missed, they tell you what code category you missed so that you can go restudy. But what I wanted to point out here is that at the top of each of these sections, it lists where the source material came from. So in this case, this is 14 Code of Federal Regulations, Parts 89 and 107. And for Part 107, it's Subpart A. And then there's AC, which we'll talk about in a second, 107, it's a document 107-2, and then FAA directives here. So when you're going to read this, this tells you what you have to go study. But these are fairly large documents, and it just says, hey, you need to go read this. And this could be, I think this is the pilot's handbook. That's about a couple 100-page document on its own. The Aviation information manual is another couple 100-page document. So there's no real pointers to what you want, right? And then so this is under the Part 1 to Part B, or Section 1, Part B operating rules. These are all the different things that you need to know. And again, the cross-references to these pieces. And I actually took this, converted it into a spreadsheet, and started actually creating answers to all of this and summarizing it. And I gave up after about 5 or 6 hours because there's just so much material here. So the next thing that I'll point you to, this is good to know, right? This is kind of your cheat sheet when you're going through, do I know what they're talking about? I use this to practice and say, this is what they're asking for, right? This kind of gives you an idea of what the FAA is interested in. And I read someone else's study guides that said, hey, if you're stuck on a question on the test and you're trying to figure out what they're asking for, you need to kind of think of what is the FAA most interested in testing me on, right? And I found that these subjects helped me understand the type of material, right? So under hazardous operations, yeah, there's a lot of different things you could be doing, but the FAA is probably not going to ask you about carrying hazardous waste. They're probably going to ask you about being careless or reckless or dropping an object. And for their example, there's a drone at a concert, dropping T-shirts or CDs. Right, and so the T-shirts might be okay. The CDs are definitely hard objects, right? And that's not right. So this kind of gives you an idea of what types of things the FAA is going to look for. Now, when you go to this advisory circular, it turns out that the FAA has a lot of times when they publish these laws or statements or rule updates, they often provide the actual legal text that's used by the lawyers in court for deciding things, but then they publish a summary document that's a little bit easier for people who are not attorneys to read. And in this case, on Part 107, they published this thing called an advisory circular, number 107-2A. This is the FAA page where you can then get to it, right? Let's see, AC 107-2A, right? It shows you what the document cancels, right? And so there's a couple of different PDFs. So let's take a look at this one, right? So here's the advisory circular. Wow, it's 105 pages, but it actually talks through all of these different sections that the list of knowledge piece, the airman or ACS. What is it? I forget what it's called. Right. The Airman Certification Standards, right? So everything that's in here is also in 107-2, but it's written a lot easier for you to read. But gee, look, all of a sudden this actually links to Part 1's 43, 47, 48, 71, 73, 89. A lot of material here, right? But what's nice is that, okay, so you have this, and this tells you where to go look, but it basically, if you come in and you start reading these sections, let's see, let's get to the meat of it, right? For example, right, there's a cross-reference that says somewhere that says, hey, if you have an accident, you may also be required to report it to the NTSB. But it doesn't say that, so it doesn't give you a lot of specifics. And then when you go and read the NTSB 49 CFR Part 830, right, it's a whole lot of pages. This is the only place I found that summarized that and said, okay, this is what you really need to know from a UAS operator. So I actually went, and no surprise, and read Part 830, and then this kind of summarized it all and says, okay, this is the important stuff you need to know. Right. This particular section is talking about accident reporting, and it gives you a lot more details. So it summarizes everything that you need to know from all of those hundreds and hundreds of pages. Okay. So operating rules. Operating rules is 3 sections in the ACS, but this summarizes it. So this really was the first real guide that I used to read. And if there was something in here that I didn't understand or didn't make sense to me, then I could go to the cross-reference pages and go find the source document for it to read that. So if you don't read anything else, read Part 107, read Part 89 on remote ID, and read this for sure. Okay, so this is kind of your starting point that is your guide or your index into all of the hundreds of pages of the pilot's manual, the AIM, the weather manual, and all this other stuff. Okay, so once I read this, then I happened to come across this website, and I've got a couple pages from this. You can see where this is from. I cross-linked to this webpage down below, but this gentleman has written a study guide that really cross-references everything, and I found this invaluable. This really is kind of the gold standard of what I think you should be studying. I found it very useful, and there's a whole lot of information about drones that take you into a lot more detail. But for example, he walks you through also signing up for the test, how to get get through the testing process. But he also has the link to the ACS, which we've just covered. And then he also has his own test that you can take. But let's see, he has cross-references to other study guides. But here's the thing that's really great. On this webpage, it actually cross-references each of the material and cross-links to the ACS, right? So for example, 14 CFR Part 71 designation of Class A, B, C, and D, and you hit the cross-link, and here it actually takes you to the actual source material. So if you start with this and read all of these sections that he's listed here, I think you're going to be more than fine. There's hundreds of pages here, but this really is really well organized, and I found it really, really helpful. He also pulls out the things that you might not catch, like so the rules from Part 91, which is the actual traditional air operations and aircraft operations and flying pieces, right? Here's actually the cross references to all of the pieces that you need to know rather than all of Part 91, right? Special security instructions. So he pulls out the section on 830 that I referenced, the SAFOs on lithium batteries, but also calls out, for example, in, let's see, in the Aviation Weather Handbook, right? This is a couple hundred page handbook, but here he's pulled out actually the sections that you need to know. I agree with this. I read a large chunk of the Aviation Weather Handbook. I had a lot of problems with weather, but this actually pulls out the pages you really need to study. And then from there, you can go off and see some of the pieces. So again, this page was really critical. That's the CFR. Okay, so that kind of is the study guide piece. Now I'm going to move into some of the particular sections on the web pages that I needed help with or that I found particularly useful. One of the big things that everyone really focuses on is the sectionals, and I think that gets a lot of study or a lot of people talking because, to be honest with you, they're really kind of arcane, but they make a lot of sense and they're kind of fun, and you start feeling like a real pilot, and you're reading these and you now understand, and as you one day you look at it and it's really, really complicated, and then the next day all of a sudden you start understanding, right? And so you start with, okay, I have sectionals, how do I read them? And I started off with, hey, I need to get printed copies. And if you like printed copies, there is actually a place here you can see where you can actually go buy the latest copy of visual flight rules and instrument flight rules and chart supplements and all of that. And so if you're a paper copy type of person, you're putting it in a book, there is a way to get this there. I didn't buy them. I quickly found later that you can actually go and get the electronic copies through the FAA, saving yourself quite a bit of money. But if you wanted paper copies, then you can buy them, right? But you can actually get through the FAA either the sectional aeronautical charts broken down by different areas, and so you go down and you can get to terminal area and then get either the PDF or the GeoTIFF, which are very large files, right? And you can see that the most recent ones were published July 11th, and the next version comes out September 5th. For our purposes, not really a big deal. You just need to know them. But you can also get helicopter maps specifically for the Grand Canyon. But anyway, the key is that you can get the sectional charts for, let's pick up the sectional chart for Atlanta, and it's thinking it's very dense. Oh my gosh, look at that. But you can use your PDF, print it, and what's important here is that I downloaded the digital copies because there are some things on the test that ask you for like special areas or control tower frequencies, right? And the electronic version of these charts that you can get online that we'll show in a second doesn't have this material on the side, but the test questions sometimes refer to it. So I needed to download some of these electronic versions so that I could see what the different materials were on the edge of the chart, because there's questions that say, hey, where would you go to find this? And if all you ever saw was the online version of this particular airport, you would never know that in the edge of the chart, of the paper chart, there's actually got all of these details about what type of airports, right? I was trying to study, what is the magenta mean, or the blue mean, or what are the different symbols for towers and things like that? And it turns out it's on the chart, and you don't have to memorize this stuff. But you do need to know where the military operation regions are, and how would you find the call signs or the radio codes, and what the restricted areas are. So going and getting an electronic version of these really is kind of pretty handy. Okay, so let me back out of here. The other thing you can get from here is what's called the terminal area charts, which is kind of cool. And these are all for all the B-class airports. I hit VFR. I want, right, terminal area charts, digital downloads. Right, okay, there's terminal areas, right? So let's take a look at our friends in Charlotte. Right, so here's the PDF for Charlotte, and it just shows you a blown-up version of the Charlotte map, so that you can see in a lot more detail. And this is also helpful when you're trying to look at this. So I downloaded these, I printed a couple of these, I found these really helpful. But then what I found that helped me even more was, it turns out that if you go to vfrmap.com, you can actually get an electronic version of the charts just by coming up and coming to something like this, right, and typing in K. By the way, in the United States, all of our airport codes start with K. And so if I want K, LAX, let's say I want to look at LAX, I can bring up LAX and be able to zoom in. Oh my gosh, you can zoom in as close as you want, well, almost as close as you want, and start seeing some of these different details. It kind of makes it easy to look at. I use this when you're on the sectional chart for taking your test. Sometimes it's like, hey, go look at this airport or whatever, and you're having a hard time finding it on the sectional map. So I went and found this and used this to pump in and really see with some of my eyesight. Okay, so this is the sectional. It helps you see, lets you go look at various areas, right? Go look at Hawaii and see what it's doing. Go look up military operational areas, stuff like that. That's really cool. But as a drone operator, I really struggled with some of the places about, okay, for example, so this is Santa Ana RCO, Riverside. So that is... Let's look up SNA, okay? So I thought, okay, this is really great, but a lot of this, especially the Type E, right? Type E or airspace Type E, I really struggle with, because it's got some specific drone callouts in it, and Type E is really... All the airspace areas are meant for pilots, right? And so there's for real pilots or who are flying manned aircraft. These EDC have different rules for visual flight rules and contacting air traffic control. For us, it doesn't really matter. None of that matters for us, but all of a sudden Type E has some particular significance to us because it tends to be right around the airports, right? So what I found is that the FAA actually has a map set up for UASs. So let's do KLAX, and right, so I want to do LAX Class B, right? So what I can see here is this actually shows me all of the drone limitations of where drones are allowed to fly under 400 feet and what type of rules they're operating in, right? So in this case, if I want to come down to what we said, John Wayne, which is down here, right? So this shows me that I've got no fly. So what this map is showing is this map is really meant for FAA flight approvers or air traffic control approvers. So if you as a drone operator said, hey, I want to come fly in this particular section right here, under 300 feet, and you put your Lance request in, the FAA adjudicator should look at this map and say, okay, if they're only going to fly at 250 feet, then I can kind of automatically approve them. It helps them. It's not an automatic approval, but it helps guide them. Now, if you say, hey, I want to fly at 400 or 500 feet, it's going to take a lot longer. So this gives you an idea of, hey, what can I, where can I fly, and how easy is it going to be to get permissions? Now, what's cool is that I can come over here and go to my layers and find like special use airspace, or I can find the VFR sectional map, right? And all of a sudden that brings on my sectional overlay, and now I can see, now I can correlate the sectional rules to this other rule, right? So we see here that in actuality, this is a Class D airport, airspace here, but the flight rules have kind of extended a little beyond that circle, right? So this is kind of cool. You can also go see TFRs here and things like that. So I found this really, really handy when I was trying to learn the difference between Class B and Class C and Class D airspace and what my rules are as a drone operator. This was really, really helpful, okay? Finally, the last thing I'll link to is I really had problems with Class E airspace, and then I found this particular blog or web page on it, and this really, really helped me. This talks about why basically any space that's not encased in one of these other areas is basically Class E at 1,200 feet, and it talks about why that's the case, and it has to do with these visual flight rule air pass here, right? So this is really great if you're having problems with that. Okay, so the next thing I struggled with was weather. It turns out that you can download the actual FAA weather webpage or a weather handbook and read through all of this. However, this is a big book, right? It's 532 pages. But if you go to this study guide, you can see what the weather sections you need to read. So instead of 532 pages, you only have to read 94. I know, only 94. Okay. So the other thing I found is that I found the CFI notebook, Certified Flight Instructor Notebook. There's a whole lot of material here, and it really is meant for manned aircraft pilots. But there's a whole lot of things that overlap, right? So airspace, restricted use. I used these different pieces. This was really good on restricted and prohibited airspace. Ground operations. There's a really good description here on departures and arrivals of the flying loop, right, and joining the pattern. Crew resource management, it covers a couple of other things. Okay, so this was part of my, and weather and icing particularly was, let's see, where was it? Oh, weather and atmospherics, right? So clouds, fog, really helped to solidify that 93 pages. Okay.
Did I mention I had a problem with the weather part of the test? I found this particular YouTube channel, Pilot Institute Airplanes. This channel essentially runs most of a ground school in free YouTube videos. And although it says for airplanes, I found their weather material and airspace material and a bunch of other stuff really, really helpful. It turns out they also have a drone site just called Pilot Institute that talks about drone news and the latest things and laws changing and things like that. So I would recommend that you look at both of these as part of your studies for the test. Weather again. This website helps you learn how to decode meters and TAFs.
This is really cool, right? This is actually a website that takes and helps you so you can do the decode and take the TAF out, right? And so I can go to KRDU and pick up the latest METAR, and here's what's actually published on the METAR. But if I go to the decode, then it actually breaks it out, and it helps you practice not just what's in the book, right? So this was really helpful when I was trying to read some of those really strange, especially the remarks, right? Reading them in real time, I could go go to the weather map, see what was going on, see what was actually there, and then come pull this. You can also get the TAF, which helps. So this was really, I really killed the METAR and TAF portions on the test. A lot to do with because I did a lot of practicing on this portion or on this website. Airport signs, I didn't find the AIM manual really that helpful. There's a lot of pieces there. This website really helped with understanding the signs, giving visuals, pieces like that. I recommend that. Risk Management Handbook, another huge multi-100-page manual. A lot of it was seemed to be really, why am I reading this? I'm a drone pilot. Cross-reference this with the material on this study guide, and that really really helped, right? So, oh look, situational awareness, just 2 pages was what they recommended. Okay. General web pages. This, I'm not going to try and pronounce. I'm sure I'm going to do it wrong. This gentleman here has a pretty large YouTube site, but he's got about 10 or 12 videos on studying for the test and how to get through questions. This particular one I found particularly useful, but to be honest with you, I watched all of his sections. I thought he did a really great job with this, and this really helped me. I've linked to the Pilot Institute before. Free pilot training, again, these are man pilot folks, but they had a lot of good material, especially on weather, pattern generation or joining the pattern, and other types of things. You kind of had to know, you don't want to just come in and watch randomly, although they will convince you if you watch a lot of stuff that you should just go and get your private pilot's license, because after all, you're 3/4 of the way done. This particular one was one I watched a couple bits. Airport signs, markings, and lightings explained, really helpful. So I encouraged that. UAVcoach.com, they have they do a bunch of training material. They're one of the pay us to help you get your 107 part license. I found their website had a bunch of extra really cool material on it. In addition to their other for sales stuff, they also have a web page or a YouTube page that really is pretty cool. But I found these kind of interesting, right? When I was getting frustrated with why do I have to learn hundreds of pages of stuff, I would come here and learn about how to capture drone photos or drones guide for different things and get re-engaged, right? If you're learning this stuff and you're like, hey, I could do roof inspecting or drone surveying or photogrammetry, I didn't say that right. I thought this was really cool as a motivation page. Okay, getting towards the end. Here, the couple of books that I recommend that you get, you don't have to buy them, but I found these very helpful. This book, I ended up buying late in my study. It was another great organization. To be honest with you, I think that you could probably have a pretty good hack at getting through the test just reading this. This is done by people who help regular manned aircraft pilots pass their regular test. I found the material really condensed, and there were a lot of times I wanted more information. Basically what happens is they've broken all the material down into a couple hundred 2- and 3-page lessons. And so they give you short and sweet, and then they test you on it. I found the questions really good for practice for the actual test. But if you want additional material, then you probably need to go cross-reference some of the other pieces. Okay, so recommend this book. Link is in the link again is in the description. This was cool, right? This is a breakout, a 6-page trifold study guide. Again, it had all the material really condensed. I don't know that you could pass the test from this because I think some of the FAA questions are a little nuanced. This certainly gives you the material, but it doesn't give you the nuances behind it. But I will say that this had the best summary I saw for the operations over people. It's on the back section for $15 if you're having a hard time and you've got the money. I would recommend getting this because if nothing else, in 2 years when you go to retake the test, this would probably be enough to remind you of what you've forgotten in the 2 years. So I like this. And then finally, turns out that this document is available for download off the FAA website. Problem is it's a couple hundred pages long, and if you print it, it's going to cost you more than the $12 that it's going to cost to buy it.
Holy smokes, that was long.
Yeah, there are so many good resources online that I looked at. It was hard to really feel like I was doing them justice, and they really helped me out, and I wanted to make sure that that I gave credit where credit was due.
And it sounds like a bunch of them were out of date as well.
Oh boy. The beauty of the internet, as you know, is that everything lasts forever. In this case, that can be kind of bad. I won't say the FAA moves quickly, but the rules and regulations do change over time, sometimes significantly, and you need to know that your data source is current not only on the latest changes, but the latest in administrative law. And the administrative law can move a lot faster because that doesn't require an act of Congress, literally. This might be another reason to take one of those training classes, is that you don't have to keep up with it online and try and find the differences. The training class will do that for you and always give you the latest material. So another check mark in the why to take an online class.
So you've talked about studying for the test. Did you actually talk about taking the test?
No, not yet. There really isn't a good way to talk about it on the screen, so I thought maybe we'd do it here, because you and I have talked about it a bunch.
Yes, we have. Yes,
Right.
So the test?
Right. So you follow the directions off the FAA webpage that we talked about at the very beginning of the screen video, and I booked my test for a Friday following those directions.
But the wrong Friday.
The wrong Friday. Turns out that when you go and you select, these are the dates I'd like to look for, when the FAA then actually brings up the page to schedule it, they don't remember that date. So somehow I got confused and I registered for the wrong date. I showed up all ready to go, having studied for the test, and the guy looked at me and said, "You're here for the wrong week, go home."
Yeah. And it's a good thing that you actually booked a week later, isn't it?
I did. But it turns out, somewhat not surprisingly, that the FAA starts sending you notes a week out and a couple of days out and a couple of other days out. So if I had booked it for a week earlier and I was watching my email, I at least would have known. And the FAA sends you many emails about the requirements of getting and taking your test.
Right. And how about your ID? Because that was an issue too.
Oh, God. So the test information email you get when you originally register is not really clearly written, and it turns out it's written to cover all possible scenarios of all copies of this test, which is kind of why I said the FAA considers me a pilot now, because the drone and the air transport pilot and the general aviation and the certified flight instructor, they all use the same process and they all use the same thing. And it turns out that the information they send you says you need multiple forms of ID. They have to have signatures on them. I mean, I tried to take my passport and realized that my passport hasn't had a signature on it for at least a decade. I had to go back at least one additional passport in order to get it, right? So I ended up taking about 4 different forms of ID, including a car registration, because I had to prove residency, and you had to have something from each required column. So I walked in with a stack of documentation about like this.
Which you ended up having to store.
Yes. So after you check into the exam, you have to give up all the materials you brought with you. You have to give up your wallet. You have to give up all forms of paper, all writing instruments, even my analog watch. For a while, I was worried that I was going to have to give up my eyeglasses in order to take the test.
And make sure you've taken the bathroom before you go to take the test.
Yep. So I was told that if I needed to use the bathroom during the test timer would not stop, okay, but you have to leave the testing center and immediately go see the receptionist and be escorted to the bathroom because they're worried about you cheating.
Wow.
It seems to be a little overdramatic to me, but as I said, this is the same process they use for air transport pilots, and you really don't want your 747 pilot going to the bathroom to cheat during the exam. So just know that it's coming, know that they're going to be really, really serious about it, and just be prepared for it, and don't let it knock you off your game. Don't get caught up in the drama that the FAA wants to give you.
So was the exam like the computer test I used to take?
I would say it's more like taking the North Carolina State driver's license test. Technology stuck back in the 90s, but yes, rudimentary forward, back, save buttons, that type of stuff, right? And unlike the driver's license, you don't have to unlike the driver's license, you have to take all 60 questions, right? The test doesn't stop once you hit the required 70%.
Okay, so it really was like the computer test I was taking.
Yeah.
Did they let you have anything in your hand? Can you have scratch paper?
So they give you and count the number of scratch pieces of paper they give you. They count the number of pens they give you. They give you an overlay with a drawing object on it, or a dry erase pen. They give you the test booklet, right? And they also then give you a set of single-use earplugs.
Earplugs?
My testing facility was a small closet with 4 desks in it. I was the only one in the room, so I didn't need them, but I can see the value. And it actually turns out to be really important, because once you finish the exam and you've gone through it all and you're waiting for your grade, they won't grade your exam and they won't let you turn it in until you answer a series of questionnaires. And the questionnaire mostly focused on the behavior of the receptionist and whether or not they gave you earplugs.
Okay. Before they would even grade that test.
Before they would grade the test, I had to give the customer feedback on the earplugs and the receptionist. So you're sitting there and you're like, did I pass? Did I pass? And no. How was the receptionist? Were they friendly? Did they give you earplugs? Did you find the earplugs sufficient? Did the earplugs work? I just want you to grade the test. Just tell me, did I pass? Did I fail?
Yeah. Somehow I think all the receptionists get really good reports because you're waiting for your grade.
Yes.
I'm sure everybody wants to know what was on the test. What questions did you miss?
So one of the sheets of paper that you sign at the beginning of this is a non-disclosure agreement that says that you won't discuss any tests or questions with anyone. I can say that I felt really well prepared. We talked about the Drone Attorney website, and that website was great. There were a couple of questions that I didn't see in the material for the study guide. They were really questions that had nothing to do with drones, and I felt like they were from a different exam that they had gotten on the drone question. But the way to approach it is that you need 42 right answers out of 60, right? Now, 42 right is the same as 60 right. This isn't like school where if you get an A on the test, it will help you if you get a C on the next one. The refresher class that you have to take in 2 years is a completely different test. So getting a 42 or a 45 or a 48 is all the same. You've passed. So I thought that the 1 or 2 questions that came from the wrong test weren't a big deal because it's not like you're getting a lower grade on it, right? They make up a small percentage. The other thing is that of these types of questions, you can probably get down to a 50-50 on it. Some of them are just obviously wrong. Some of the answers are almost funny. And then there's normally a really good, what you would think of a good FAA type of answer. So to be honest with you, if you get, for the ones that you don't know, if you can get down to a 50-50 guess, then you're at least at a 50%. So if you know how many you need to take or you need to pass, then you can get a 50-50 guess for the rest, and it's a percentage game, right? So you're probably going to miss about half of them that you don't have a clue on. So, for example, on mine, I kept track of how many I felt good about and how many I didn't feel good about. And when I got to the end of the test, at the original 60 were done, I had 9 of those that I didn't feel really confident about, right? So I did the math in my head and said, okay, I only don't feel good about 9. I'm probably going to miss roughly 4.5. I can miss 18, so let's go for it.
So you missed 3.
I missed 3. So out of the 9 questions I wasn't sure of, I did better than 50-50.
Told you he was a show-off.
Okay, so I get done with the test, and I got a printout of my results, and they told me I passed. And they said the next business day I could go up and I needed to wait for a day for the results to be uploaded to the FAA website, and then I could go through the rest of the process of requesting my license. However, being who I am, I checked immediately when I got home, which is about 12 minutes away, 12 minutes later, and they were ready to go. So I went ahead and went through the process and signed all the online paperwork and requested my actual printed license.
Which took a while.
It did. It seemed like it took forever. I was watching the FAA status page every day, and when I went on the very first day to look, they were actually about a month behind in processing. So I figured it was going to take about a month, but I was checking it every day, and then once a week, and then every once in a while, and then all of a sudden it showed up and I hadn't even checked the website in a couple of weeks. So it took about a month for me to actually get the card with my license.
Okay, are we done then?
We are, other than to tell people that all the links I've talked about today on both types of videos are in the description. I recommend you look at those for more information. The other thing is that if you like this material, hit like and subscribe. I have some additional videos coming out in the next couple of weeks that are going to talk about some of those tools that I felt I short shrifted, specifically weather reading reports and how to read sectional charts. So if you'd like to know when that information is posted, hit the subscribe button. Other than that, it's been great to see you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.